Shalom, shalom, everybody. Grace and peace, friends and family. Thank you for tuning in to another video on the Israel ben Khazar channel, where we discuss Khazar Jewish history, genetics, culture, and we also look into the type of Judaism that the Khazars practice. Now, today we have an interesting video. We will be talking about something known as the Schechter Letter. In the year 948, Khazar ibn Shahrut, a Jewish doctor in the court of the Caliph in Cordoba, sent an envoy to Constantinople. Khazar, who at first came to the Caliph's attention when he helped to translate a Greek pharmaceutical treaty into Arabic, was raising rapidly through the ranks of the court. The Caliph sent him on various diplomatic errands and eventually appointed him as one of his most senior ministers and trusted advisors. Khazar's envoy was in Constantinople, and there the envoy met a man who claimed to belong to the entourage of King Joseph, ruler of the Khazars. He told the envoy, whose name was Yishak bar Nathan, and as we know next, Khazar ended up writing to this Khazar king after the meeting of the envoy with the Khazar Jew. Khazar's envoy requested a record of Khazar history, and in this history/letter, we will see that the Khazars had first appointed a Jewish warrior as Bek rather than Kagan. From that time on, the nation had been ruled by a dynasty of Khazar Israelite mixed Beks in the dual ruling system of the Bek and the Khagan. According to Konstantin Zuckerman, we will read, there is actually every reason to believe that the letter was produced no more than 5 years after the events described concerning Pesach's war against Oleg, and was delivered to the messengers of Khazar ibn Shahrut and Constantinople, where every detail in it could be easily verified. So this quote is noting how this letter could not have been produced no more than 5 years after the events that are described in the letter that we will read momentarily. This letter is also known as the Cambridge document, named after where you can currently find the document. It was originally found in 1896 in an old synagogue in Cairo, Egypt. So not only will we read about the Israelitish Beks of the Bulanid house, but also how many Jews and Israelites migrated to Khazaria from Armenia and intermarried with the Khazars, becoming one people. We will also read about Khazar Alan and Khazar Rus relations, and the events that are written in this document are historically accurate, referenced by Rabbi Yehuda ben Barzilai of Barcelona in a sefer about the laws of Sabbath and the Jewish festivals. All right. So I'm going to read my copy, and then we'll quickly go through some of the points here and show the impact of this letter. So let's get into it. So this is the paper, An Unknown Khazar Document by S. Schechter from the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. On page 33, you have the English translation of the letter. Before that, it's the Hebrew translation. But I'll read the English translation, and let's analyze what has remained of this document. And it reads, Armenia, and our ancestors fled from them, for they could not bear the yoke of the worshippers of idols, and the princes of Khazaria received them, for the men of Khazaria were first without Torah, and they too remained without Torah and scriptures, and made marriage with the inhabitants of the land and mingled with them. And they learned their deeds and went out with them to the war continually, and they became one people. Only upon the covenant of circumcision they relied, and some of them observed the Sabbath. And there was no king in the land of Khazaria, only him who won victories in the battle. They would appoint over them as general of the army. Now it happened at one time, when the Jews went forth into the battle with them, as was their wont, that on that day a Jew proved mighty with his sword and put to flight the enemies who came against Khazaria. Then the people of Khazaria appointed him over them as general of the army, in accordance with their ancient custom, and such was the state of their affairs for many days, until Adonai, the Lord, had mercy and awakened the heart of the prince to do repentance. For his wife, whose name was Serakh, turned him and taught him profitably, and he also consisted. For he was circumcised, but also the father of the young woman, a righteous man, a Tzaddik, in that generation taught him the way of life. And it came to pass that when the kings of Macedon and the kings of Arabia heard of these things, they waxed exceedingly wroth, and they sent messengers to the princes of Khazaria with words of blasphemy against Israel, saying, "What mean you by returning to the belief of the Jews, who are subject under the hands of all the nations?" And they spake words which are not for us to tell. And they turned the heart of the princes to evil. Then said the great prince to the Jew, "To what end increase words? Let there come men of wise men of Israel, and of wise men of Greece, and of wise men of Arabia, and let every one of them tell before us and before you the work of his God, and we shall see the end." And they did so, and he sent messengers to the kings of Greece and to the kings of Arabia. But the wise men of Israel also offered themselves to come to the aid of the men of Khazaria. Thereupon the Greeks opened with their testimony. And the Jews and the Arabians began to contradict them, and after this the Arabians bore witness, and the Jews and the Greeks contradicted them. And then opened the wise men of Israel their testimony, telling from the days of the creation until the day when the children of Israel came up from Egypt, and until they arrived at an inhabited country. To the truth of this, the Greeks, as well as the Arabians, bore witness and confirmed it. But there also arose a dissension among them. Then said the princes of Khazaria, "Behold, there is a cave in the valley of Zur. Bring forth for us the books which are there, and explain them to us." And they did so and went into the cave, and behold, there were there books of the law of Moses. And the wise men of Israel explained them in accordance with the words which they spake first. Then Israel, together with the men of Khazaria, returned in perfect repentance. But also the Jews began to come from Baghdad, from Chorazin, and from the land of Greece, and strengthened the hands of the men of the land, and encouraged themselves in the covenant of the Father of the multitude. And the men of the land appointed over them one of the wise men as judge, and they call his name in the tongue of Khazaria, Khagan. Therefore, the judges who arose after him are called by the name Khagan, even unto this day. As to the great prince of Khazaria, they turned his name into Sabriel, and they made him king over them. Now they say in our land that our ancestors came from the tribe of Simeon, but we are not able to probe the truth of the matter. Now the king made peace with our neighbor, the king of the Alani, because the kingdom of the Alani is the strongest and the hardest of all the nations that surround us. For the wise men said, "Least when a nation shall rise up to war against us, he also joined unto our enemies." Therefore, he concluded peace with them to help one another in distress. And there was the terror of God upon the nations which surrounded us, and it came not against the kingdom of Khazaria. But in the days of the king Benjamin, all the nations rose up against the men of Khazaria, and brought them into straits, according to the counsel of the king of the Macedon. And there went to battle the king of Asia and Turkey, and Peniel, and Maestan. Only the king of the Aleni was in support of Khazaria, for some of them observed the Torah of the Jews. All these kings waged war against Khazaria, but the king of the Aleni went against their land and smote them with slaughter, so that they could not recover. And the Lord smote them before the king Benjamin. But it happened also in the days of King Aaron, that the king of the Alani fought against Khazaria, for the king of Greece incited him. But Aaron hired against him the king of Turkey, for he was then his friend. And the king of the Alani fell before Aaron and caught him alive. But the king honored him very much and took his daughter as wife for his son Joseph. Thereupon the king of the Alani swore unto him in truth. And Aaron the king sent him to his house. And from that day there fell the fear of Khazaria upon the nations which surrounded them. And also in the days of my lord, the king Joseph, when there was the persecution in the days of the wicked Romanus, and the matter became known to my lord, he trod down many of the uncircumcised. But Romanus the wicked also sent gifts, great gifts, to Helgu, the king of the Rus, the Russians, and incited him for his own evil. And he came in the night upon the province of the Severians, and took it by deception. For the commander, the head of the princes, was not there. But when the matter became known to Belshazzar, or Pesach, the reverer, he marched against the cities of Romanus in fierce anger, and smote both man and woman. And he took 3 cities, besides the hamlets, very many. And from there he marched against Shor-Shu, and fought against it. And there came out of the earth like worms Israel, and there died 90 men of them. But he made them serve under tribute, and saved from the hands of the Rus, the Russians. And he took all those to be found of them, sword. And from there he went out to battle against Helgu, and fought months. And Elohim subdued him before Pesach, and he found of the plunder which he took from the Severians, and he said, Romanus beguiled me to do this. Then Pesach said to him, if this be so, march against Romanus, and fight against him as you did fight against me, and I'll depart from you. But if not, here I shall die or live until I shall have taken vengeance. And thus he marched against his own will, and fought against Constantinople 4 months on sea. And his mighty men fell there, for the Macedonians prevailed over him by fire, and he fled, but was ashamed to return to his land. And he went to Persia by the sea, and fell there, he and all his camp. Then the Russian became subdued under the hands of the Khazar. Behold, I make it known to my lord, that the name of our land, as we found it in books, is Arcanus. And the name of the royal city is Khazar. And the name of the river that passes through its midst is Etil. And it is south of the sea that comes from, through which your messengers came to Constantinople. And I believe that it starts from the great sea, but our province is distant from that sea, 2,160 risks. And between our land and Constantinople is 9 days by sea and 28 days by land. And the land of the dominion of my lord is 50 days. Behold, there are those who fight against us, Asia, Bab al-Abwab, Zibus, Turkey, and Leznu. So as we see there, this Schechter letter, some things that I think were interesting in this letter is how we read that the Khazar Jews were mixed with the tribe of Simeon. We also read through other traditions that the Khazar Jews mixed with Manasseh, and then the Jewish tribes that came from the Persian lands, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. And it's interesting because we read that Elkanah ben Joseph, he says that Judah and Simeon had spoke Hebrew, Greek, and Togarma, which could be Turkic. This letter describes the Khagan as a shofet, or a judge, and it was composed in Hebrew, just like the Kievan Letter. The Khazars seem to speak Greek, the language of the Brit Hadashah, and Hebrew, the language of the Torah. We also read that the house of Bulan, the Bulanides, whose name was also changed to Sabriel, is of Khazarian Israelite origins. And this is interesting because we could see this clearly in my DNA, with a clear split between Israelite DNA and Turkic DNA, but a little bit more Israelite DNA. Very fascinating. We also read of Pesach, the Khazar Baliki, and we know that this was wrote by a Khazarian Jew of Constantinople, now known as Istanbul. This could have been the possible reference for Yehuda Halevi in the writing of the Khazari. And we also read how close the islands were to Khazarian Jewry. We see the Khazars and the Jews who migrated there from Armenia intermarried and became one people, that the Jews were practicing some of the Khazar customs there. That's how he even became part of the line of the Bek. The influence of his wife Serakh and the cave in the plain of Zur, where there were the Khazarian books and the Israelite books of history and Torah. Eldad the Danite, a Jew who possibly came from Eastern Africa. Well, that's what the scholars say. I believe he came from either Northwest Africa or West Africa. But he wrote in the late 9th century that the tribe of Simeon and the half-tribe of Manasseh lived in the land of the Khazars also, and took tribute from 25 kingdoms, including some Muslim nations. So this is another fascinating tale of how the Israelites and the Khazars had mixed before the Khazars were truly established as a nation. In another document called the Chronicles of Jeremiel, it is said that Ephraim and Manasseh formed a large confederation of hard-working horse riders who lived opposite the city of Mecca. So all of these things are interesting and to note. So with that, I'm going to say grace and peace and shalom. Let's examine the Schechter Letter and examine the truth of the matter. And let's continue on to more Khazarian history and Judaism and culture. Until next time, shalom.